as you light the green screen well, which actually is kind of hard. But that's the hardest part. Then it's just in OBS. Are you familiar with streaming software?
Okay.
I had lots of frame dropping in OBS, so I'm guessing that works better for you then.
Yes, yes. This is great.
Oh
Hi
my.
guys.
Reflex. What does that say?
Well, yeah.
Cool. Cool or not cool?
Right.
Cool or not cool? Who's the moderator?
Physically delivered? What does that mean?
Oh, you mean just to like have it in the background?
Yeah, not huh? Kind of like on the side like this. No?
Wait, but it's gotta be reversed, right?
No, it's good for us.
Yeah,
You need to tape it up on that whiteboard or something.
who's the moderator?
Hello, and welcome to the October 2020 Bitcoin Cash Network discussion. These meetings serve as a public forum for presenting initiatives that have an impact on the BCH network, addressing questions about those initiatives from a diverse set of network stakeholders, and then gauging support for relevant aspects of that initiative. Today, we're joined by Callan Culianu, developer for BCHN and Electron Cash, Tom Zander, founder of Flowy, Josh Green, developer at Bitcoin Verde, Peter Chipper, developer at Bitcoin Unlimited, Paul Chandler, CEO and founder at Aptitio, Andrew Stone, developer at Bitcoin Unlimited, Eleanor Blanc, business developer for Satoshi's Angels, Peter Ng, miner and OTC dealer, Mark Lamb, CEO at CoinFlex, and Mark Lundeberg, independent developer. So before we begin, I'll review the meeting format. And this will take just a minute. I think it's important for viewers and potential future participants to know what to expect from the meetings. So each item on the agenda will start with a short presentation. That presentation will cover the topic's relevant problem statement or use case, the properties of a good solution or implementation, the status of current solutions or implementations, and finally, any costs of supporting the use case or solving the problem. Once the presentation is finished, the floor will be opened up for questions from present stakeholders. After everyone's questions have been asked, we'll gauge support from present stakeholders for different aspects of the topic as is appropriate. So today's topics will be removing the unconfirmed chain limit presented by Callan Culianu and double spend proofs presented by Tom Zander. And before we get started, I'd like to just emphasize a couple more things for this inaugural discussion. One, the meeting format is a work in progress, and it can and should change as we recognize how to serve the Bitcoin Cash network most effectively. So please do give us feedback privately or publicly. Two, the meetings do not directly represent the Bitcoin Cash network because Bitcoin Cash is decentralized, and so there's no such thing as official representation. Instead, each participant represents themselves as a stakeholder in the network. And then similarly, we do not assume that these meetings will be the only public forum for discussion around the Bitcoin Cash network. Anyone else can hold any meetings with any participants with any structure, of course. We simply aim to be as effective and productive with these discussions as possible. So with that out of the way, I will turn it over to, and actually I've forgotten who was going first. Was it Callan?
I'm going first, Callan, yeah.
Very good. All right, Callan, you have the floor.
Okay, so removing the unconfirmed TX chain limit. Problem statement and use case is the first part. So currently there is a 50 long unconfirmed ancestor limit for mempool transactions. That is for unconfirmed transactions. You can't have more than 50 of them in a chain that all depend on each other. So what is an unconfirmed transaction chain? First of all, this is a little bit different than just normal transactions. It's when you have like transaction A sends a coin to somebody, and then that's coin B, and then that gets spent, goes on to C, and then that gets spent and goes on to D. So the same coin basically being passed along like a baton. And as long as they're all sitting in the mempool, the limit of that is 50. So it is a bit like passing a baton around. And not everybody does this. When you're normally using your wallet, you wouldn't do this, but some applications do rely on this type of thing. And the limit used to be 25 for quite a while, since BCH's inception. And it was recently raised to 50. So currently the limit is 50. You can have 50 of these individual transactions that all spend the same coin like a baton that gets passed around. You can have up to 50 of them in the mempool. If you hit that limit, you have to wait. You have to wait for some of those transactions to confirm or all of them to confirm, and then you can continue to pass the baton around. So that's sort of the state of affairs right now. Now, this limit is not very popular with some businesses and some ecosystem members. There's been, I know Bitcoin.com, Read.cash, Satoshi Dice. It affects their use cases. Some of the things they want to do. They want to be able to quickly do chains of transactions. And when they hit this wall, they have to wait, or they have to do workarounds. They have to keep more money around and then spend from other coins that aren't in the mempool. And there definitely has been pressure to see about raising this limit in the past. And thankfully, it was recently raised to 50. Now, so basically, we want to investigate how can we raise it, since people have been talking, some businesses have been talking about wanting it raised. Like what do we need to do? And well, that brings me to my next section, which is properties of a good solution or an implementation. A good solution would significantly raise the limit. Something like 500 or 1,000, or maybe no limit to the unconfirmed transaction chain would be ideal. And you'd want to do this without introducing any DOS vectors. You don't want to make it impossible to run a node because it slows to a crawl. Like someone sends like 10,000 transactions in one chain, and then like no one can even accept those and all the nodes crash. Like you don't want that, right? And so that brings me to why this limit exists, actually, because the reason why it exists is that as you add transactions to this chain, it gets exponentially more expensive to update all of the transactions in the chain. And yeah, so it was decided the limit should be 25, and then it was raised to 50. Now, if you think about it, like what is so special about these transactions that are in a chain? Why is it so slow to add another one at the end? And I looked into that a little bit, and it seems like one of the things is that these transactions sort of go as a package. They go together, and basically you want to know how much they all cost to confirm to get, like if you're a miner building a new block, maybe you want to pick one of these chains and like put it in the block. And so maintaining that state, that fee information, is one of the costs. It's like a quadratic problem, big O of n squared, to like go back. Every time you add one, you have to check with the other ones and like update the fee information. And this sort of thing got engineered for BTC, and we inherited it apparently. It was engineered. BTC is very fee oriented. The mempool is congested, and I mean, it's a nice feature that you're able to maximize profit for miners. That you're able to look at these chains of transactions and instantly tell how much each one costs, and then pick a package. They're called packages. But this comes with a great, this feature, this fee package stuff comes with a lot of slowdown. I mean, you can't have more than 50 of these now. And so one of the things I was thinking was, and some people have been talking about this, was sort of just doing away with this capability of considering transaction chains as a package and then trying to maximize profits for miners. Because right now mining isn't extremely profitable on the fee side. There isn't that much money in fees, and hopefully, we don't want it to be that like BTC where you want to maximize profit on fees. So one of the features is called child pays for parent, where you can attach a transaction at the end that's extremely expensive, that pays a lot of fee, and it bought all of its ancestors, so they all confirm together. And one of the things that I was thinking some people were talking about was getting rid of that feature, and then he sort of simplifies everything. You can have like 10,000 transactions in a chain, or 1,000 or whatever, and you can just keep adding to the chain, and you don't have to go back and update all of them and do all this update stuff. So yeah, I mean, that's the idea. But that's not necessarily optimize the code. I know BU has done parallelization of this kind of stuff. So yeah, so that's what's going on. And now the current proposal and implementations, like I said, BU has the capability to handle unconfirmed TX chains 500. I think someone was telling me that. Actually, I haven't verified this. I could be getting it wrong. And Jonathan Tumim has investigated sort of weakening the child pays for parent guarantee, which, by the way, nobody uses. Nobody uses child pays, as far as I know, because we don't have a fee like a mempool congestion problem. We don't have like a robust fee market like BTC. So this child pays, it's something that it might be a right to weaken or just throw away, right? So then Jonathan Tumim investigated, and he's written some code where you can get much faster, like big O of n rather than n squared. And then conceivably you could just have a 2,500 TX limit rather than 50 for free. So yeah, so assuming this was addressed and somehow child pays for parent or whatever the solution is, parent, you know, what would the costs be for this change, right? So the cost is mainly going to be shouldered by the nodes. I think it's basically consensus type rule, like, you know, like new implementation, like all the nodes are sort of have to have kind of the same rules and agree on how to do this. And then you could roll it out as an update, and then nobody else would really be impacted except for the positive side, that they could send longer chains. Like it wouldn't be like a DAA where you have to update wallets. You know, so the cost would be basically be shouldered by the node implementations. And ideally, you'd want to roll it out in sync as a network upgrade if you were to do this. And so, because you don't want nodes like banning each other because they're getting too many, they don't agree on it. You know, you're like, hey, you're sending me too many transactions, you're a spammer, and then like ban, right? So you don't want that to happen. So ideally, it'd be like a heterogeneous, it would be a homogeneous network. And then like for end users, I think like some sites like Satoshi Dice would be really happy if the transaction limit, the chain limit was increased. And I know Bitcoin.com would be happy. And so, yeah, I mean, the cost would be shouldered by the nodes, but the benefit could probably be the entire, you know, you could just do more with BCH. You could have baton-like semantics for smart contracts where you just pass the baton around the contract. It's like, I don't know. That concludes my my little introduction to this idea of removing the unconfirmed TX chain limit. And yeah.
You're muted, John.
Yeah, John, I can't hear you, man.
My apologies. Sorry about
If I
that.
could just hop in for a point of info. Oh,
well,
sorry.
so what I'd like us to do for this is sort of make sure we phrase our questions to Callan. So I'm gonna just to keep it organized and make sure, you know, I want this to manage. Excuse me. What I'd like us to do is focus on presenting the presenter with questions, and I just want to make sure that while obviously some context will be appropriate, ideally, if this is the sort of thing where it's actually going to be more content explaining the state of the situation, that might be something worth saving for either a presentation in the future or bitcoincashresearch.org. And so we're going to use the hand raising feature. Actually, I apologize. I should have looked where it is on the interface. But can someone chime in? There it is in the lower left hand. So I'm just going to ask, first of all, if there's any questions for Callan that want to clarify the meaning of his presentation. If there's anything that you didn't get, and so I want to get that out of the way first, and I'll give it 5 seconds. Okay, so I do see.
Yeah, I just like
Andrew, you're well, okay. If you want to do Peter, I was going to check if Andrew's question fit under that after I did all that clarification.
I just wanted to know what the proposal to remove CPFP, or is it to increase obviously to increase the chain limit, but is it also to remove CPFP completely?
Not necessarily, only if it makes sense. Although I like the proposal that I just gave is basically let's investigate how we can raise the chain limit or remove it, and then let's explore avenues. So one of the avenues might be removing CPFP, right? Because nobody cares about it, and it comes with a huge cost. Sort of, you know, let's do the engineering required to answer that question. Like, how can we raise the limit intelligently? That's, you know, definitely I'm open to CPFP.
Yeah. I guess I mean, I don't know if you use a CPFP now because obviously the mempools are not nearly full. Just wondering if anybody knows, you know, is somebody going to use it in the future?
Yeah, we should first find that out, right? Before we throw out the baby with the bathwater. Find out if we need that baby. Yeah, that's one of the things we should be doing.
Did you guys see the research I published a couple of months ago, which basically looked at the blockchain and investigated who actually used child pays for parent? And it was like 10 transactions over an entire year.
For an
or
entire
3
year.
months, something like that. But at least, you know,
Wow.
an extremely low number. We had another set of a lot more transactions, but they had such ridiculous numbers to them. They can't possibly have been specific to the Bitcoin Cash chain. They paid so much fees that it sounded more like it was just BTC code being run on BCH.
Right, that happens,
And
right?
I just want to, if I may step in,
Yeah.
I just want to point out that this is ideally something we'll have prepared beforehand. And so obviously appreciate the presentation, but before we either dig further into the details of whether or not CPFP is worth removing, since that was only barely touched upon, what I'd like to do is then leave it for questions for Callan. We'll gauge support for what that has been clarified to be the main point, and then we'll just keep moving on so that we can not get lost in too much of this, and then we can come with an update next time, because I think dev minutia, and I realize this is borderline dev minutia, but I'd like to save that for offline, and then we can bring basically the presentations here. So apologize for cutting you off, but I think that is probably. Thank you much. Okay, my apologies. So Andrew, your hand, if you'd like to go ahead.
Yeah, there was some question in the presentation about whether Bitcoin Unlimited could do over 500.
Yeah.
And so just so that doesn't become like a shelling point, I just wanted to say that, we just picked that number randomly, effectively, because we didn't want to shock the community with an unlimited type number, but certainly, we
can like a sane limit, but maybe you can do much more with your parallel.
Yeah.
Looks up code, right.
Yeah, exactly.
Got it.
Mm-hmm.
So you guys can do more, but 500 is you being humble. Got it.
Yeah, we just put that out there.
Okay.
As a good goal.
Appreciate the clarification. Okay, so now if anyone, we may have already moved on to it, but if anyone has any general questions for Callan without not trying to clarify anything, you'd like either raise any concerns, but as long as, again, is there a question that can be addressed by Callan, and if not, then it'll be something saved. So that was Josh. Please go ahead.
Hi. So I am firstly very much in favor of removing the transaction chain limit. But there is, I think, another reason to at least consider keeping it around. And it has to do with the user experience for transactions that are either double spent or not mined. So if you have a very long chain and like the first one happens to not get accepted into a block, then the whole chain of them are no longer valid, and that kind of like branches out a lot. So you can actually have a pretty bad user experience. We don't really have that scenario too much because most of our, like if you send a transaction, it gets mined into a block, especially if it gets accepted by your peers. But we do have the scenario of like double spends, making that a degraded user experience. Because if like the great ancestor of yours happens to be a double spend, then
right. So yeah, that's totally a good point. That should be taken into account. So one thing is you can there's the double spend proof stuff that Tom is going to present next.
Exactly.
But, the other thing is also, you can enforce it on the UI, on the, like, why should the entire ecosystem, like, why should like Satoshi Dice not be able to spend what they want? Maybe you can just have wallets to encourage wallets to not let users send like super long chains that can get screwed up or something like. Maybe there's a way we can, we can make everybody happy, like have a very high limit, but also make sure that users don't do stupid things.
Yeah, I think it's
some ideal sweet spot.
Yeah, for sure. It's going to be a risk reward.
But it's definitely a good point. Yeah, it's going to be a risk reward.
And so like my question was basically like in place besides double spend proofs that reduce that. And that was obviously like relevant because I know we're going to be talking about double spend proofs next. And, but yeah, I think like ultimately I don't, like I said, I'm just removing the whole limit completely. In fact, Bitcoin Verde like doesn't have those, and
do not do the fee package. Do not do child pays with parent.
Well, we do like a recursive query for the mempool. So like when it's going to calculate the fees, we just like let SQL do its thing, and we're like calculate how much this is. So yeah, it could kind of like Bitcoin Unlimited. It could literally do as many.
Okay. I guess we don't want to do too much dev minutiae. John was saying not to do too much.
Yeah. Sorry. But anyway, that was my point. So
yeah.
Very good. I see Tom Zander, hand up.
Yeah, it really fits together with the question. What do we do with unconfirmed transactions? Basically, how can we make it safe for the wallets? And I know some bigger companies, and the first thing that I'm wondering about is have they considered to make the wallet before bullet maybe, make the wallet that they ship also take into account, hey, there's this transaction is a child of 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 something that's confirmed.
Yeah, right.
Maybe I should give it a bit more risk.
Yeah.
And the guy sees it on his phone. Hey, you should be aware transaction might actually need to be confirmed before you give out the goods.
Yeah.
Something like it. I think most wallets currently are very black and white, or you don't. And we might need a little bit more engineering on the wallet side. So I'm not sure if Roger is still online, if he can answer that they might want to actually take a look at that in the wallet and have a bit of a risk profile to incoming transactions.
I agree. Yeah.
Right. So that will be.
And I'm not sure what the etiquette is for me to speak. So, sorry. Anything's possible with the UI on the wallets, but ideally, technically, we can make an issue even if you have this long chain of unconfirmed transactions. If one farther up the chain gets double spent, it's not possible. And maybe I'm asking for the impossible, but that would be my ideal situation where we can, since there's some sort of method, once the transaction is broadcasted, even if there's a whole bunch of ancestors of that transaction, we're still good to go. But it's just easy for the end user and not have to worry about anything.
Sure. And just for the record, again, I'm happy for us to have this discussion here now that it's happening. But ideally, this is another thing that will be done even before we're here. We've reached out to specifically, Bitcoin.com and Satoshi Dice and find out exactly what it is that they would want and what they're willing to do, or maybe even having it would involve more devs explaining what would need to be done. But either way, ideally, this will be done before so that we can come in and we can say Bitcoin.com has given X confirmation and this other business has given some other X confirmation. But of course, not going to quell any discussion as it happens naturally here. So hands up. I think once your hand's up, you may have to manually put it down. Josh, do you have another one?
Yeah. So I was thinking the one thing, I'm going to post this after this meeting on the bitcoincashresearch.org website. But I think we should probably do some research on actually propagating the double spends, because if your ancestor is a double spend, like not everyone's going to accept that. So like the children are going to also be invalid when they get propagated. So we actually might not even have too much that degraded user experience might be extra hard to even encounter. But I think we should definitely do some due diligence to figure out what that
I
looks
agree.
like.
Yeah.
I'll post a thing on it after.
Yeah. No.
Andrew, would you like to? Do you have another question?
I wanted to comment on Josh Green's his scenario, and that was please consider. Let's say you had a transaction chain of say 500 transactions, right? And you somehow managed to get that 500th and put it, show it to a wallet. Then in that case, if the limit is 50 per block that can be confirmed, the double spender has 10 opportunities, right? 500 divided by 50 to double spend that transaction, right? Whereas if all of those transactions were confirmed in a single block, then the double spender would just have one opportunity. So there's actually an argument that says, in fact, if the network really ought to confirm every single transaction that it sees, and yes, the wallets should put up the appropriate warnings and disallow double spending of certain depth and so forth.
Yeah, I think that's a very good argument, right? Totally. Yeah.
Good deal. Okay, so sorry, there's another hand. Please go ahead, Mark.
Oh yeah, sorry. Just wanted to address what Tom or what Andrew was saying there. So there isn't a limit on 50 per block right now. There's only a limit on what gets into the mempool, and blocks themselves can have unlimited chains, and there's actually no performance degradation if a block is 32 megabytes of one giant chain. It's the same as if it were all independent transactions. Actually, probably a bit faster because all the UTXO are cached. But
yeah, that's true.
Right, but if they're not in the mempool, they can't get into a block.
Yeah. Well, I'm just saying that the scenario of having 10 blocks in a row, I don't quite understand it. anyways,
Well-
I guess that's a technical thing.
Sure.
Imagine
no,
BU
no,
is holding 500 unconfirmed
Ah,
transaction
okay,
limit of
okay. This is
500,
with the
and we're
BUs.
trying to push 50 at a time to the rest of the network.
Yeah, like
right?
BCH on nodes or whatever. Yeah. Yeah, I
Right,
was
right,
imagining
exactly.
that. And
So
like
we're in
this
this
is
situation.
This is
with
the
electric
BU's
cash.
strange thing. Okay. Yeah. I see. Right.
Well, I wouldn't call it strange, right? An attacker could easily create their own full node that behaves in this exact way. And, if it's able to connect to your wallet, it can present that transaction as inside the Bitcoin network when it's really not.
Right, like they could set up a Fulcrum server and have an Electron cache. Yeah, you can imagine.
Sure.
Yeah.
That's a very good point.
Going further on this point, though, about long chains and the UI experience on wallets, like I don't think 50 versus 50,000 really makes a big difference, because what tends to happen in the mempool is you get a lot of like unrelated activity happening, like different economic actors are doing different things. And so if there's somebody trying to pull off some sort of exploit, it's going to be affecting, one part of that network. And if it's 50 long or 50,000 long or unlimited, I don't think it becomes any harder or easier.
Wait, so you're saying that the limit is there for no reason?
The limit is there only to prevent, the denial of service, this quadratic thing that you're mentioning, right?
Right.
This fee optimization problem.
Yeah.
I think that's when it was introduced, and that's like it's there. It comes together with that whole fee optimization thing, basically.
Okay, so I realize we haven't reached necessarily, even an agreement on what we're talking about, maybe at the deepest level. But if it's all right, I'd like to move on to just measuring support for at least the things that we can sort of quantify were covered in the presentation. So in this case, I think we'll also use the raised hands feature, so make sure everyone's hands are not raised. I believe we're all good there. And first, I just like to gauge from everybody, and feel free to vote or abstain from voting if you feel like you're not a stakeholder in this case. Obviously, however much you are a stakeholder, it's just that's however appropriate it will be for you to make your opinion heard at this point. So first, hands, I would like you to raise your hand if you agree that raising the unconfirmed chain limit in some way is a goal that is worth the costs. And there's a feature in very good, thanks. All right, so we have hands raised from Calvin Culianu, Mark Lunderberg, Tom Zander, Mark Lamb, and both Peter Ung, Paul Chandler, Josh Green, Peter Chipper, Andrew Stone, Roger Veer, Fernando Pelliccioni, and I'm not a stakeholder, at least not for now. So that's everybody, if it looks like, but if not, it's everybody whose name I read. And actually, while I'm thinking of it, thank you, Roger Veer, Executive Chairman at Bitcoin.com, if I still have the title correct, and Fernando Pelliccioni, Lead Developer at Knuth, and also contributor at Bitcoin Cash Node. Thank you very much for joining us. So the next thing that I'd like to ask, which is, I realize it's effectively the same question, but again, I think it's good to have it sort of officially recorded. If you consider yourself a stakeholder who would have to invest something, if there's a cost for you, if you are involved in a project that would need to do work in order to do what we have established here, which at this point is really just look further into the problem. I think that's what we established here. If you're a stakeholder in that aspect and think that it will be worth the cost to you to invest in looking into a solution for increasing the chain limit, if you would please raise your hand. All right, we've raised hands from Calvin Culianu, Mark Lunderberg, Tom Zander, Mark Lamb, and Peter Ung, I assume both. Very good, thank you. We have Josh Green, Peter Chipper, Andrew Stone, and Fernando Pelicioni. And then, so the last, for the end of the presentation, I'd just like to turn over to Colin one more time to ask, is there another needs to have support gauged, or do you think we've pretty much covered with that until the next meeting?
I think we've covered it until the next meeting, it sounds like. Yeah.
Very good. Thank you very much. All right. So up next, we have presentation from Tom Zander on double spend proofs. He's prepared a video, and so we're going to use the Jitsi feature, which allows us to, through the meeting, fingers crossed it works. If not, we'll switch to screen sharing. And actually, my apologies. Was that a cheap line? Were you going to do that? I can also do that, but I have to find the feature because I forgot to check how to do it. So my apologies for that. Here it is, share YouTube video. Okay, sure. I had everything open and then I had webcam difficulties. So pardon my slight disorganization as I bring this video up. This is what they call dead air, and I'm responsible for it. Let's see.
Yeah, sorry for preparing something. It's easier to, edit something if you do it offline.
Your willingness to put it together beforehand is much appreciated. It definitely, especially when I have the link already available, is much easier, but even still. Okay, so I'm clicking share now, and that should bring it.
In order for Bitcoin Cash to be useful as cash, merchants really need to be able to accept.
Okay, I've paused it. Did someone say they can't hear it?
Yeah, it could be louder in my opinion.
That might be this. I think the video might just be a little bit quiet. So if you're able to turn it up just for yourself, I don't think I think it's maxed out.
Okay, gotcha.
In order for Bitcoin Cash to be useful as cash, merchants really need to be able to accept zero-cost transactions, which are transactions that haven't been added to a block yet, because otherwise they'd have to wait for an average of 10 minutes after each payment. Currently, a thief can create two conflicting transactions, one that pays the merchant and another that sends the same money back to himself, and send both to this network at the same time. And some of the time he will walk away with the goods he bought, and the transaction that sends the money back to himself will be the one that makes it to the next block, instead of the one that sends the money to the merchant. This is called double spending. And in that case, the thief will have successfully stolen from the merchant. A system that notifies merchants about the existence of a conflicting transaction within several seconds would eliminate that risk, allowing them to react to the situation however they think is appropriate, for example by withholding the goods or alerting law enforcement. Merchants that are expected to release goods to the customer shortly after payment benefit most from the double spend proofs. Brick and mortar stores and online shops that deliver electronic goods would have their payment experience improve dramatically and would have their fraud risk almost completely eliminated. Let's look at some properties of a good solution. First of all, a solution to double spend problems should not even try to decide which of the two transactions should be the normal versus the stealing one. This is impossible to do objectively in a decentralized system. And a notification of the double spend is all that's needed for the people involved to react. Currently, nodes reject conflicting transactions. A solution should also not involve forwarding all transactions no matter what. While it may seem like that would allow more nodes to detect double spends and then provide a notification to the involved wallets, it turns out that it also helps the thief to double spend more often, because it helps those conflicting transactions that would otherwise simply be rejected by the node to be seen by many more. Instead, a solution should allow you to prove that a double spend has occurred without actually forwarding the second transaction and without providing enough information to reconstruct that second transaction. A simple notification is not good enough because then a node would send false double spend notifications and disrupt the payment process that way. The message should still prove that a double spend has occurred. And finally, the solution should notify the wallets that are involved in a double spend. So here is my proposal. The double spend proof specification I've been working on is in essence a message containing two signatures made by the same private key, both signing the same transaction output, but for different transactions. It fulfills all of the criteria that were just covered. It does not try to determine which transaction is the correct one and which is the double spend. It doesn't require forwarding the second transaction to anybody else, and it doesn't require forwarding enough information to reconstruct the second transaction. It cryptographically proves a double spend has occurred, preventing nodes from faking double spends. And it notifies the wallets involved in a double spend transaction. Let's take a look at the cost of double spend proofs. A complete implementation of the double spend proofs would involve software at every layer of the Bitcoin Cash development stack. Nodes need to implement creating and forwarding these double spend messages. So far, Flowy, the Hub, and BU full nodes have already added my proposed implementation. BCHD and BCHN plan to have it implemented by November. The minimum percentage of the network nodes that need to implement these proofs for them to be reliable is about 40%. Many middleware solutions, like the REST APIs and the block explorers, would also need to implement the feature so that services that depend on them can take advantage of it. Wallets and point-of-sale software need to implement listening for these double spend proof messages, and then also implement a user notification. Businesses that take advantage of these proofs will need to train their personnel to react to double spend notifications. The idea of a fraud alert will probably not be an alien concept to point-of-sale workers, minimizing the extra work required, and the reduced fraud risk may make it profitable investment in the long term.
All right. So thanks very much, Tom, for putting that together. Just like before, if we could start with any questions that are specifically about the meaning or the intent, just to get that out of the way. Please raise your hand if you have a question along those lines. Mark Lindenberg, please go ahead. Oh, and I'm sorry, I haven't been keeping an eye on chat. Okay, we're good to go. Sorry, go ahead, Mark.
I think my hand is raised left over from before, maybe. That's the problem.
Okay.
Yeah. I might have a question in a bit, but I'm just going to put my hand down for now. Sure.
Okay, and then we'll open it up to just any general questions for Tom. Please go ahead and raise your hands now if you have any. Very good. I see no hands. So we can go ahead and gauge support. I'll probably let's skip to the second one instead of just a general showing of support. As a stakeholder, to whatever degree you have stake in this decision, please raise your hand if you agree that the use case of adding double spend proofs is worth it to you, given the investment that you expect to have to make it a reality in whatever facility you would have to do that work. All right, we have hands from Calvin Culiano, Tom Zander, Josh Green, Peter Chipper, Andrew Stone, and Roger Veer, and Fernando Pelliccioni. All right. And then I'd like to just ask Tom, are there any specific parts that you think should have support gauge for them? Any specific parts about the proposal besides generally that you would like to get feedback on, not necessarily feedback, but feedback as in just general support, whether you have agreement with anything?
Yeah, right. The proposal and the code that we already have is in some ways quite far along. We already have a good amount of support in several full nodes that are creating them. But this is something that we would like to companies, stakeholders come up and say, hey, I'd like to add this to Fulcrum. I'd like to add this to REST APIs and stuff like that. And wallet makers, so much, I think in this meeting, I think we've got a good indication that people are interested in that. More for the viewers, you know, is there some more support to be got by others that are doing some work, that are making a wallet, that are working on REST API, or anything else that, you know, comes that settles between the full node and something that an end user sees that would care about this. They would want to have support, and I think, for instance, the guys might be interested as well to, you know, see if they could use this to try out if they can have more feedback and get more secure payments, deposit money at their place. You know, it's just those yeah, it covers everything. It's a new tool for a lot of people to use. Now it's there, and I think that would be fantastic for people to, you know, start using, because then we get a better, more secure system.
I admit I didn't quite follow, but Josh does have his hand up. So if you'd like to just follow up, please go ahead.
Oh, well, maybe we should give someone else an opportunity to answer his question.
And then I guess I should ask, did anyone else, I had trouble following what the question that was being asked was.
I mean, it wasn't really a specific question. It was more of a general, who can see them using double spend proofs in their own product to increase the payment, the unconfirmed transactions being more secure, basically. Is there not just here, but also in general, other people that are interested in doing that, and have people, you know, reach out or join or whatever. Sorry, it's not very well formulated, I guess.
For the record, this also might be this sort of thing just early on. It might be painful early on, and maybe we'll have to change the format. But generally, I think that's the sort of thing that ideally will happen before we're even here. You know, we'll reach out to presenters, will reach out to any parties they think will have vested interest to this meeting with, you know, a statement from said stakeholders if we're not able to bring them here ourselves. And then it'll be easy. You know, they'll be here to say, yes, I did say that, and we won't have to really hash much of that out here.
Yeah, I'm just talking to the people that are looking at the recording, because already it's actually quite impressive to see the amount of support, and I don't want it to be a presentation and then no questions.
Well, Josh, then do you want to go ahead?
Yeah, totally. So the unlike the previous issue, which had, you know, proposal that had like it has a non-zero risk to an uncoordinated deployment. Does double spend proofs at all like pose any risk to the network of an uncoordinated something that we can do at any point in time? And is there a benefit if we all do it at the same time?
Yeah, it's a good question. So there is a bit of a risk that, technically speaking, we're kind of expecting to be past already in a couple of months. If wallets start depending on it, but the infrastructure, including full nodes, don't have good enough support for them yet. So you might not be connected to the origin via a path of transactions yet. Which means that you could depend on it, but you don't get the message while you expected it. And with now several nodes already supporting it, and we hope to get more of them to support it in the next couple of months, that risk is basically, we expect that to be no longer there anymore. Then it just becomes a case of the next layer has the same problem. So if you have a wallet that connects to Electron X protocol, but the Electron X protocol has a dozen servers, all of them should be upgraded, and ideally they all upgrade at the same time, or you just basically can't promise that you actually get the message in the wallet until some months later when they all are upgraded. You see where I'm going? It's a phase thing. First infrastructure, and then the wallets can do it, because otherwise people that use the wallets are gonna expecting it while it's not really sent yet. That's basically the biggest risk. And I think that's a very small risk, because it's going to be built in order anyway. So it's probably not going to be something that happens within a week anyway. So I think it's manageable.
That makes sense. Thanks.
I will get to Callan in just a second. We do have a couple questions from YouTube, which I would like to get to at least before I forget. So from JT Freeman, we have, do double spend proofs help outside of POS systems? And this may sort of call back to the question you were even maybe asking to the group. And so that can be both to you, Tom, and then probably to anyone else. Anyone else knows of specific examples where double spend proofs help besides, point of sale situations?
Yeah, so the main argument is for point of sale systems, brick and mortar, and electronic stores that basically ship their electronic goods immediately. They are the main benefits. What we're hoping for is to establish that the zero confirmation transaction drops in risk to a very maintainable risk, to basically be risk-free. And then you can see there are other use cases, like, for instance, an exchange could lower the amount of confirmations it needs. Yeah, of course, wallets peer-to-peer is kind of like a point of sale, but it's more personal. And I think that we basically have 99% of the ecosystem done already.
Deal. And then also we have from Matthew G says, I would like to know what the general criticisms of DS proofs were by all we know who, and that may have not been supposed to be the end of the sentence, but hopefully you get the gist. Maybe, do you know of any general criticisms of DS proofs in general, or the current implementation, or any downsides maybe?
When we had a workshop in 2018 in Italy, there was a nice set of people doing descriptions of how they would like to see this done instead. And I had addressed that in my introduction. The main suggestion back then was to forward the entire second transaction. We figured out later on that this was actually a really bad idea, because it made transaction double spending much more easy. And I think this is not done on the network anymore. So that's the only criticism I know of. If anybody else has any, I'd love to address that.
Very good. And Mark, if you'd like to go ahead.
Yeah, I guess I could throw out some criticisms just as examples. So what about denial of service? Like there's additional network traffic that anybody can induce across the whole network by sending like one small message, right? You just have to create two conflicting transactions and send them out, and then there's extra activity all in the network, but you only have to pay for one transaction. So is that a concern? As far as I know, no, if it's programmed correctly, but what do you see as far as the denial of service risks to the network? I think that would be the main one as far as rolling out on infrastructure.
Yeah, we looked at that early on, and the basic design is that if you get a double spend transaction, any node will refuse to forward it unless it also finds one of the transactions that it is about in its mempool, which basically means that you cannot send more double spend proofs than transactions. They all have to match one. And so you come to the basic question, can you spam, can you DOS the network with transactions that are actually accepted in a mempool? And I think that's basically an open question. I think we are pretty sure that you can't, and we are working on that. But it doesn't add any acceleration to the system. It basically is a one-to-one. If you have one double spend proof, you have to have one transaction in your mempool already accepted. Which in short means there's no DOS effect to conclude that.
Yeah.
All right.
I have some other questions, maybe, but I don't know if
if you want to follow up.
If this is
okay, so
time.
again, it might be the sort of thing that at this point we want to save for later, if it's that stuff. But I mean, again, if it's a short question that kind of puts the ball in his court to elaborate on, please go right ahead.
Crap, I forgot the question. Never mind. I'll think of it later.
Good deal. Thanks very much. All right, so. And I apologize. We did do a gauging of support initially, and then that's right. And then I asked Tom. So that pretty much covers everything. I do have a couple questions from YouTube for the previous subject, and also I would just like to point out that as much as we're trying to make it structured, with specific questions that sort of put the ball back in the presenter's GM, I'm not going to stop using. I would like to especially encourage business owners and basically non-developers, if they have practical input that is more along the lines of just providing feedback, you're the ones we want to hear from, because dev minutia can happen outside of here. And ideally, communication with businesses about support and the details will also happen outside of these meetings. But if there's a practical if there's practical input that someone has as a business representative, please feel free to obviously raise your hand and bring it up. And if it's so far out of left field, we can talk about it later. But I prefer to having input from that group of people in this meeting. So the questions from YouTube for the previous subject, one from Phil Harris 09. Asking, does increase of chain limit help exchange? And Callan, you have priority answering that, but then also anyone else who has thoughts on it, please feel free to raise your hand.
That's a good question. Does it help? Does it help exchanges? It may. They do move money around a lot, right? They have, conceivably, exchanges have thousands and thousands and hundreds of thousands of coins sitting around, and they may want to shuffle them around. I mean, exchanges typically wait for confirmations. For most of the business they do, right? They don't like the risk. I actually don't know the answer to that question, if it helps exchanges more or not. I'd like to find out as well. I'll keep that in mind. I would like to find out as well if it helps them.
Good deal. Mark or Peter, go ahead.
Yeah, it helps on the withdrawal side, because on the deposit side, you might be waiting for a confirmation. And there are some businesses that don't, but like blockchain poker. But on the withdrawal side, it definitely does, because exchanges structure their transactions where there's a change that's 100% of the balance of that address. They're spending out of a single address, and then you don't have to worry about basically hot wallet management as much.
That makes a lot of sense. Yeah, I can imagine that. Yeah, that's true. On the withdrawal side, yeah.
Very good, thank you. And then I think, let's see, do we have one more question? Oh, I'm sorry, there was a second after that question. Does increase in chain limit help exchanges or double spend proofs? Callan, or also Mark, if you'd like to take that one too, if double spend proofs, for example, would maybe make it viable to lower, confirmation requirements or anything like that.
Oh, I mean, I imagine the two go hand in hand, right? Because there's the issue with if you have longer chains, you sort of want to know if there's a chance that the whole chain can collapse. So with the double spend proof, you can get to find out if one of the early transactions in the chain is going to collapse, is double spent. There's a chance that the entire chain will get confirmed. So they synergistically go together. They help each other out. Double spend proofs and unconfirmed transaction chain increasing. They work together. Does that answer the question, or perhaps somewhat?
I think we're good. Yeah, go ahead.
It's very useful to be able to confirm transactions in the system without waiting on a confirmation, even if it's like you do it for only certain low value things or something like that. It's super useful. So the faster customers get their money, the better.
Yeah, I tend to agree.
Very good. If you pardon me while I just peruse the last of the questions coming in. It's like a couple of these maybe are not quite on topic enough for the presentations that were given today. One specific question, this was addressed to Roger, but I'm sure anyone who else who has an opinion on it. The question is, does it matter if the unconf limit goes to 1,000 compared to unlimited? And this also may have been touched on a little bit already.
Yeah, I guess we don't know if it matters or not, right? Who knows what use cases aren't going to be put into use if it's not unlimited. So in my ideal world, it would be unlimited. For the use cases I know of myself at hand, like 1,000 would probably be just fine. But maybe other people have chains of dividends going out to people all over the world, and who knows what they want to do. So the more useful things people can do with the chain, the better.
Very good, thank you. And then maybe just one more question from YouTube. Thank you all for sticking around through this part. From JT Freeman, I guess this is not anecdotally related, but semi-related. It's asking what is the chance of miner-assisted double spend attack? And I guess that's sort of given that we're talking about solving the double spend that sends two transactions. There are other types of double spend. So would you maybe just take a second to talk about what the risks are for those compared to the ones that we're solving?
Yeah, absolutely. This was originally called the Halfini attack, and that is a good indication of how old the idea is. And the miner-assisted double spend attack is essentially invisible to the network because it happens behind the scenes, and only when the block comes out do we see that indeed it has been double spent. The tricky part here is that it's not really a technical thing. It's more of an economical or market thing that you talk about, because as it is, as we're seeing the miners more centralized, we used to have lots of people using CPU miners, and now they're going to pools, and you can't really have one guy doing mining and then going to a store and spending it anymore. That's just not the way it is, because this one miner doesn't decide what he puts in a pool. In a block. So as we go to a much bigger system where much more money goes into mining, the chance of this happening goes down considerably, because it basically is economics problem at this point. I think that the best description of this is a very old blog from Gavin Andreessen for the lols, where he essentially explained how it was so cheap to make a block back then, and nowadays you get so much money out of it. Why would you do that? It just doesn't make any economical sense. So yeah, sure, it's possible, but at the same time, it is extremely implausible. And also it means that as the economics go, it just isn't a risk to the average storekeeper, because the amount of times this can happen is extremely low compared to the amount of transactions that actually go through the system. It's not really something you want to solve, because it isn't. There isn't a cost benefit, as far as I can tell, that helps you solve it. It would be too costly to solve it for the harm it actually causes the network. I haven't really seen anybody complain about it, to be completely honest, that it happened to them.
What's that, John? I can't. I think your audio's down.
I did it again. Sorry, I tried to be careful and keep it down, but then I forget. My apologies. Was your hand up, Colin?
Yeah, I just wanted to chime in that just to be clear, it sounds like for double spend proofs, we're talking about day-to-day purchases. Like, you go to the store and you buy $10 worth of, I don't know, peanuts or something, or you go to the bar and you order a drink. I mean, for those small purchases, you're not going to get a huge mining pool to commit fraud for you. I mean, it doesn't make sense. If you're buying a car, you wait for confirmations. I mean, that's how I understood it. Is that correct, Tom?
Exactly.
Right.
Yes. So the cost of doing such a double spend has gone up quite considerably, because the network got bigger, because the amount of money going in on mining. If they make a several thousand per block, do they really care about the $10 extra that you can double spend? And at the same time, the amount of transactions that we actually have are going up. So it doesn't really make economic sense in bottom line. I'd have to write it down a bit more to flush out my thoughts, but this is the general gist of it.
Thank you. Josh, go ahead.
So my question is actually a response to the previous question from YouTube about does it make sense to have 1,000 or unlimited? So if what Mark's about to ask is relevant to what we were just talking about, then I think maybe he should go first. I don't know what he's going to ask. Or
Mark, is that were you going to respond to something that Tom just said, or bring up something somewhat separate?
Oh, my hand went up again. Actually, I did have a question. I was going to sort of make an observation, which is, it's all about the risk and reward. If you're waiting for one confirmation, there's still a risk you're going to be defrauded. And, if you wait for 100 confirms, right? So, yeah, you just have to, look at how big the purchase is and compare it. You're going to be defrauded for that purchase. And, one versus zero confirmations is on that spectrum of, risk. It's not black and white. They're not totally different. So, yeah.
Thanks, Josh. You want to go ahead?
Yeah. So the max transaction chain limit is actually something that we encountered for the city of Dublin's token system that they were using, and we had I think it was 100 people sign up all at once, and then we hit the transaction and then the user experience from their perspective, and then also the user experience system was awful because when you hit that limit, your transaction isn't really invalid. It's just that a lot of times you don't get a reject message, so you actually just broadcast this transaction and it just falls in you as a system don't even know that it wasn't accepted. So now you're sitting with a bunch of transactions and in your application's wallet that you will try to chain on top of when the next block comes, and you that transaction doesn't exist, and then you basically like stall your own system. So the user experience from a developer's perspective, like a not protocol developer, but an application developer, suck. So the concept of so the cost is really high if you don't account for that. But then the concept is, well, is 1,000 enough? And I mean, like the reality too is it's not just your transactions for 1,000, right? It's all sent you an input that you try to spend that also happens to be 500 or 900 or something like that. That still counts for you. So if you then go and create 100 more on your own, you're still going to hit that limit. So as long as there is a limit, I would definitely urge application developers to consider handling that case, because the user experience degrades so fast. If you don't, I would say like the cost from so the cost from application developers is still really, really high, even if whatsoever. Because you need to account for it. But if there is no limit ever, and you never have to write code to like handle that, then your cost of development can be less. So one thing to consider when contemplating, well, do we just make the limit something really, really big, or do we make it, that was just food for thought that came up.
All right, I appreciate the input. So I'm sorry, Callan, you have one last thing. This will probably be it, I think.
Yeah, I just wanted to address what Josh was saying. Like, it seems possible to not have a limit so far from my preliminary engineering. And, like, it seems like that's something that can happen, but we'll see. I don't want to go out and say that, but yeah, I mean, I'm thinking it along those lines as well. I agree with you. Basically, that's what I want to say. Thanks.
Very good, thanks. So I would like to encourage folks who gave their presentations. Well, first of all, thank you very much for presenting, and I would like to thank everyone else for attending and giving your time and making your voice heard. That's invaluable, and doing it in a public forum, I think, is also invaluable, so that other people can know kind of what's going on. I think we also found out that maybe the proposals given today, there are things that need to be done practically, like finding out exactly what businesses are going to benefit and getting their input beforehand and their support even beforehand, so that we can know for sure, like, yes, there are people who want this, and we definitely established at least some of that today, obviously. But the parts that were missing today, I think, would be entirely appropriate to bring up in a future meeting as a follow-up presentation. And I think that's also something we'd like to establish, is the potential, at least, for follow-up presentations when something was left open-ended like it was today. So I think that'll pretty much wrap us up. Again, thank you all for watching. Viewers, please go ahead and subscribe to the channel. If anyone is interested in participating in these meetings, or or bringing a proposal to the meetings, please check out bitcoincashnetworkdiscussions.org. From there, there's the link to our YouTube channel. There's the link to the Telegram group, where we recommend that people bring in preliminary versions of their proposals, so that we can make sure that they are up to the standards we're trying to set here, so that we can have extra productive and smooth meetings where it's facts get laid out, and then stakeholders make their voices heard, and we can move on. And beyond that, I haven't written out an intro, but thanks very much, everybody, for tuning in and for joining me. It's much appreciated.
Thank you, John. Thank you.
Cheers all, and Cheap Lightning, if you want to kill the stream. Thank you very much.
Thanks, John.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Are we?
Thanks.
Thanks all.
So that's it? We hang up or what? That's it. All right. Bye.